I want you to take a look at faces. These faces. Completely innocent young lives, ripped from their beds, from their toys, from their friends, from their homes. Many of them likely watched the two people who always vowed to protect them from the monsters and the bad guys, mom and dad, get slaughtered by terrorists right in front of their little terrified eyes. Most of these faces, I believe it's safe to assume, did not survive. We hope they did. This is the moment Hamas terrorists kidnapped a mom and her two babies. Now look how tightly she is grasping them. Look at their calm faces knowing that mom will protect them. And look at the terror in her eyes as she realizes she can't. This is evil. There's not another word that is more accurate to describe what is happening. Yet thousands of Americans have taken to the streets to defend these actions. One of our own elected officials can't even bring herself to utter a single word of sympathy. Watch this.
Terrorists have cut off babies' heads and burned children alive. Do you support Israel's rights to defend themselves against this brutality?
We're just going to go through here.
You can't comment about Hamas terrorists chopping off babies' heads? Congresswoman, do you have a comment on Hamas terrorists chopping off babies' heads?
How does that happen? If you're struggling to understand the world as it is today, and the evil, and those who refuse to take a stand against it, you're not alone. Tonight, as we are on the precipice of another genocide and another possible world war, I remind you and your family that right now, tonight, is the time of choosing. I want to just say before we begin tonight's broadcast, there are going to be some things that I think will immediately shelve this broadcast, and it will forever only be seen on BlazeTV, but it is important and you'll understand why in just a minute. Also, the time for choosing. There is no place for sidelines. There will be no one left in the stands. This game, good versus evil, everyone will be on the field, whether they want to or not. So if you or someone you love thinks they can avoid making a choice or looking at this, remind them that that's what millions of Germans did in the 1930s. They refused to stand up, mainly because they just didn't want to be pointed out, and they saw thugs in the streets in brown shirts. Then it got a little tougher. Then if you spoke up about the Jew next door that was being disappeared in the middle of the night, if you even went and opened your window and looked through the curtains, you and your family would face the same fate. That's why nobody said anything. It was too late. This program, as for me and my family, I know who we serve and why we serve. If you're watching this program, you most likely are the same. Much of this program is not for you. It is in hopes that there will be even just one that will stumble across it, see the truth, and realize what side they're actually on. I was hoping to be able to make an announcement because tomorrow I'm taking a stand and I think you will join me. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I hope to be able to have the news so I could broadcast it tonight, but it will have to wait, hopefully, until the morning. We want every T crossed and I dotted, but stand we will. Because every once in a while, evil will manifest itself in a physical form. And that's what we saw this weekend in Israel. Here's a statement from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He made this on Monday.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless. Once the Jewish people were defenseless. No longer. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come.
Did you hear what he just said? We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come. The Hebrew version of this was just slightly different and more powerful. Here's what he said in Hebrew. What we will do to our enemies in the next few days will echo for generations. It is being reported that Israel is preparing an imminent ground invasion. It's going to get ugly. There's no question that Israel is absolutely justified to completely dismantle the Hamas terrorist group. And notice, I didn't just say Hamas or the Hamas, as Western media outlets do. This is Hamas, the terrorists. The count of the dead and wounded is rising every day. This shocking and horrific attack killed over 1,200 people and injured more than 2,000. The terror group immediately began posting videos of their carnage in near real time. This video shows the opening salvos. They first used drones to take out the watchtowers. A rocket attack gave them cover while hordes of terrorists rushed the border. They attacked a military site, seizing equipment and killing Israeli soldiers. Then they moved on to slaughtering civilians in a nightmarish bloodlust. 1,200 dead. The number keeps rising because they open up more and more communities and find hundreds dead. By the way, that includes 22 American citizens. And how were they killed? Well, listen to this from an IDF spokesperson.
The overwhelming majority of the casualties that we have sustained have been from close contact fighting, or rather executions and cold-blooded killings of Israeli civilians.
Executions. The overwhelming majority of them, their death came at the hand of executioners. I'm going to come back to that, but it's important context to understand, especially when you see how the rest of the world, the media, the United Nations, most of the left, treat and publicize Hamas, aka the terrorist group Hamas. A couple of years ago, NBC talked about the wave of popularity that Hamas had in Gaza as they strolled along with them in a military parade. Do you think they'd do that now in Russia alongside Putin's military? On Monday, the United Nations observed a moment of silence for, quote, the loss of innocent lives in the occupied Palestinian territory and elsewhere. Elsewhere. Occupied. They hate Israelis so much they can't even imagine and take the time to acknowledge the word is Israel. Just listen to this horse crap they were shoveling.
Regrettably, this whole huge loss of lives and unabated violence is a sad reminder of more than 7 decades of illegal foreign occupation, aggression, and disrespect for the international law, including UNSC resolutions.
If you are somebody who agrees with that, give me 5 minutes. Over 1,200 people were killed. The overwhelming majority of the deaths came from executions, and the United Nations just blamed Israel for it. If Christians had been taken into death camps in Germany in World War II, and they were liquidating Christians, and we found the death camps just like we did, except it's not Jews, it's Christians, or it's atheists, or it's leftists. When we freed those death camps, would you be for people in American uniform going house by house and shooting the men, the women, the children, and beheading babies? Would you be for that? The question is why? Why would you or why wouldn't you? My answer is I wouldn't be for it because we would become everything we despised. What kind of civilization does that? Defund the UN and never send them another red cent ever again, in my opinion. What we saw was filth all over the world, even as the dead were still lying in the streets. The Democratic Socialists of America marched for the terrorists in New York. Others marched in Chicago, Australia, and on and on. Massive groups, cities all over the world, they celebrated the terrorists. In Australia, they said, chanting, "Gas the Jews." Do they not know the context? Are they stupid? Or are they dangerous and evil themselves? But here's what they're celebrating. I don't think we have a full grasp on how many hostages Hamas took back into Gaza, but here is one woman that was taken. To the people now celebrating Hamas in the streets, to the people sitting in their ivory towers at the UN, the people on CNN or on MSNBC, look at her pants. Look at her pants. Don't turn your eyes. How often do you think the back of her pants have been soaked in blood? Was that prior to this? Another woman dragged away by Hamas as she cries and pleads for help. We have no idea yet what became of her. Hostages were taken by the truckload, including children. Hamas terrorists went home to home, slaughtering every innocent they could. This entire family was executed in their home. Some of the captives were paraded down the street and then executed. One Israeli family saw Hamas execute their daughter. Listen to this as one of her siblings tries to understand what is happening, and then the look of absolute terror as the barbarians come inside.
My sister died.
Relax. Lift to boy.
What? No, Dad.
Share this with anyone and ask them the question, what kind of society would you build if you glorified this? I don't want to watch these videos, much less share them, but the message is clearly not getting out, and this may be our last chance to choose. A vast amount of youth now think Hamas are the good guys. Government institutions like the United Nations run cover for them. Our own government has given them millions and billions of dollars. Netanyahu said on Monday that Hamas is ISIS. Ideologically speaking, there is no difference. There are videos and images that were put out this past weekend that look exactly the same as ISIS in 2014. They are beheading soldiers and civilians alike. Now, Hamas says it will start executing their captives and posting the video and the footage on social media. The media, activists, NGOs, governments, they are showing us their true colors right now. They are taking their masks off and choosing a side. You must not remain silent or on the sidelines. Anything but an absolute rebuke of these terrorists and full-fledged support of Israel to defend itself is nothing more than a wink and a nod to evil incarnate. Tonight I bring you these images that I just showed you. The EU is again showing these images. The UN, even the state of Israel has asked people not to share these videos. It's bothered me all day leading up to this show. I think it's important for you to know why I chose to show them. We will be demonetized and the show will probably be removed on YouTube, but it will remain on BlazeTV. And here's why. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us blameless. Not to speak is to speak. We've said over the last 80 or so years, never again. And we say that to remind us to not forget the Holocaust. But why did the Holocaust happen? How did it happen? Well, a few reasons. One, people didn't take Hitler seriously when he wrote about killing all of the Jews in Mein Kampf. He doesn't mean that. He's not serious. Well, they didn't take him serious at first, and then they were afraid to say anything because the brown shirts were in the streets doing the bullying. Then there were a few brave souls. One, a volunteer who got himself arrested to go to Auschwitz to get the names and document what was happening. He escaped. He delivered it to the Allies, but nothing happened. We did nothing. One of my heroes in my life is Raoul Wallenberg. He's Swedish, who at the United States, request went in as a Swedish embassy attaché. We asked him to document what was happening to the Jews. Well, he smuggled the information out to America. We did nothing. He couldn't believe it. Then he got out and smuggled more information to Churchill, but the British did nothing. Then he went to the Swiss. Nothing. When I say that God will not hold us blameless, last time, very few people knew for sure that they were executing Jews just because they were Jews. They've been saying the same thing that Hitler said in Mein Kampf. They've been saying it for years. You don't believe me about Hamas? Well, don't take my word for it, but take their word for it. Watch.
اللهم عليك بيهود شل أركانهم ودمر كيانهم اللهم مكننا من رقاب يهود اللهم مكننا من رقاب يهود
فلقد اقترب يوم ذبحكم وصالكم والقضاء عليكم حتى لا يبقى يهودي ولا صهيوني على وجه هذه الأرض. عقيدتنا في قتالكم أننا سنبيدكم على بكرة أبيكم ولن نبقي منكم أحدا.
اقتلوهم حيث ثقفتموه، ما فيش بنعرفش حدد وين ما بنستطيع سنقاومهم.
التي يتبر فيها ملكهم ويباد فيها أبناؤهم.
اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم اللهم عليك بالأمريكان ومن والاهم اللهم احصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
There is your Mein Kampf. There they are, in their own words, on videotape, saying they want to kill all of the Jews. This is not about a land dispute. This is about killing all the Jews. But they don't mean it. Let me just say this. Even Hitler tried to hide it from the world. At the end of the war, they tried to burn the records and destroy the evidence. They didn't want any of this to get out. Even those that devised and carried out the final solution in the end were ashamed and didn't want the world to see. But we are facing a new kind of monster. One that doesn't hide in the shadows, one that says it out loud. We talk about aggressive language that can get people killed. Sarah Palin said they targeted that district. And that is violence. Words are violence, but this, the left and the media ignore. Why is that? We are facing people that are more aggressive and more bold and dedicated to wiping off the earth every Jew. And they don't stop there. During World War II, I have read so many stories about how people risk their lives just to get stories from the camps. They didn't have films. They didn't have pictures. Maybe people would have listened if they had videos or films of putting people into the gas chamber. But this time, we have the video. There is no excuse. If you don't recognize this as evil, you cannot turn your face away. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself, and God will not hold us blameless. We can be a beacon of light. We can. Tomorrow, I hope to share with you some things that you can do and do in your own life that will make a difference. None of us want these times to come and be a part of them in our time. But it's what we do with the time that makes all the difference in the world. It's what we do right now. Saving children and families and pushing evil back into the darkness. Let me tell you about preborn. Preborn is for women in their darkest hour, deciding between the life and death of their precious child. You see, the reality is women are being pressured to make this fatal decision, and they're being told that babies are just a clump of cells. Preborn welcomes women with God's love and introduces them to the beautiful life growing inside them, which doubles their baby's chance at life. And when you support preborn, you not only support women, you empower them. Your donation of just $28 will help a woman make a choice that she won't have to regret for the rest of her life, because it is the ultimate blessing to give birth to life. Your love, your $28, can pay for an ultrasound and save a life. Just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or visit preborn.com/Glenn. Do it now. Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro on with me in just a minute. The amount of questions that everybody has over this this massacre is unlimited. For starters, how did neither the Israelis nor the CIA know this was going to happen? How did that happen? Hamas recently released this video showing exactly how they trained for the attack. Everything was completely out in the open. They're training in the air and land in full uniform. It's not like Gaza Strip, is so huge you have a hard time keeping eyes on it. The land area is less than half the size of New York City. It is mind-boggling how a nation as capable and vigilant as Israel could make such a colossal screw-up, and I don't have a good answer for it. This cannot be swept under the rug, and the entire world needs an explanation. But what's the next question? Who was behind it? Those most directly responsible are obvious, the Hamas terror organization. But everyone, whether they want to say it publicly or not, knows that Iran pulls their trigger. They give them the funding and the weapons, and there's no way Iran did not know about this attack. Officials told CNN 2 days ago there was no smoking gun linking to Iran. And that was really interesting because the very next day after the attack, the Wall Street Journal provided the smoking gun. The article explains how the Iranian officials had been involved with planning this attack since August. Last week, they met with Hamas in Beirut, where they officially gave the green light. The outlet appears to have suggested that they have a high level of spies in both Hamas and Hezbollah that confirmed all of this. I'm sorry, what? The Wall Street Journal has more intelligence assets than either the CIA or the Mossad? I don't think so. And the speed of this article coming out the very next day seems to suggest one thing: a leak. Now, either it was a leak from the CIA or Israel, but that kind of reveals that they both know Iran is behind this. They have the smoking gun, but they refuse to admit it publicly. I don't like being played, and I don't know who's playing us right now. My guess is that the entirety of all of this is coming from the Biden administration, Because how long have Obama's stooges been lying to the world on behalf of Iran? How many pallets of cash to terror organizations or terror regimes will they finally give before they get it? If you legitimize and fund the bad guys, people die. But I'm not sure they're not fine with that. After Trump suspended aid to Hamas, Biden swooped in and restored over $200 million. The State Department eventually admitted that those funds could go directly to Hamas's butchery. Knowing this, and after this past weekend, can I ask, how do you sleep at night? Do you see the Biden administration? It went into overdrive on Saturday trying to explain the $6 billion payout they gave to Iran. They claimed that those funds were locked for anything, other than food and medicine. No, can't touch it. And they blasted this talking point to journalists all over the country. That was until the former State Department advisor on Iran demolished it. He described how Iran's budgeting process worked and how they would use that $6 billion to redirect funds towards things like what we just saw in Israel. Just how Obama did, the Biden administration is lying to all of us about Iran. They'll cut sanctions, they'll give them billions in payouts, everything to try to hand Obama his legacy in foreign policy. They don't care how dangerous it is or how many people die from it. They roll out these ridiculous experts that claim Iran will someday become a responsible player in the Middle East. It's geopolitically sound. Shut up. All of these experts have put us exactly where we are today. None of these so-called experts would ever say the words 12er or the 12th Imam. They refuse to recognize that this is extremely religious for Iran and those who are in the parachutes. I refuse to listen to these experts when they omit Iran's primary ideology. Every billion-dollar check we cut for that terrorist regime brings Tehran one step closer to their goal, the annihilation of Israel and the death of every Jew on the planet. And then we're next. That is what Iran is doing. That is why they greenlit the attack on Israel. It also threatens to draw in the United States, and I'm sure Iran's ally, Russia, would just love that. Yesterday, I spoke to Ben Shapiro, who only left Israel hours before the Hamas attack. To him, it was personal when he saw American media outlets and organizations cheering on the terrorists. On his show, he decided to play the uncensored footage of what Hamas did. I asked him why. His answer next. I asked my radio audience today to mentally shift gears. It is important to you to understand that we are on the threshold of World War III. Hamas is already breaching the northern borders, Hezbollah, breaching those northern territories in Iran earlier this afternoon. This will become a regional war, and I fear it will become a global war. We need everybody in the fight. Man, if you're in pain, get out of pain. Get out of pain. I know, you've tried. I tried everything too. My wife finally said, please just try Relief Factor. I was ready to quit because I just couldn't do it anymore. Well, 70% of the over 1 million people that have tried Relief Factor, their trial pack, go on to order more month after more, and I'm one of them. We need you in the fight. It's not a drug. It was developed by doctors. It's not going to whack you out. Just try the trial pack. Now go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4RELIEF. 800-4RELIEF. Relieffactor.com. These images are disturbing. However, I believe that we made a huge mistake when I worked at CNN and at Fox. We weren't allowed to show the American people, except on September 11th, any of the footage of September 11th without special permission. We're a nation that forgot it. These images, here's a grandmother posing with a Hamas member. There are images that are unspeakable. A family cowering, someone killing families, children beheaded. Ben Shapiro was on his podcast the other day, did an incredible podcast, and also has written a great article called The Face of Evil, where he starts, I am a Jew. And he says that he needs people to see all of these images. Ben Shapiro joins us now. Ben, why is it important for people to see all these images?
Because the face of evil is almost inexplicable until you actually see what they do. I think that we are so used to dealing with people around us who think like we think and act within the same general moral frame. Even the people we think are, our worst enemies in the United States act within the same kind of general moral frame, which is why we can theoretically have conversations with them. But this is something of a completely different kind. These are people who do not think like you. They do not act like you. They do not care about the same things that you care about. They operate in a completely different sphere. And that sphere is a sphere in which babies can be beheaded, and this is a moral thing to do, in which women can be raped and then kidnapped or murdered. A sphere in which the invasion of peaceful communities to slaughter innocents is considered an act of good and something that ought to be done on behalf of Allah. I mean, they're shouting Allahu Akbar while they're doing these sorts of things. These are not people who can be negotiated with. These are not people who are simply having a reasonable disagreement. These are not people who care about territorial concessions. These are Jew-hating, Nazi-esque monsters, and in some ways worse than the Nazis. At least the Nazis, a sentence I've never said before, a phrase I've never said, at least the Nazis had the understanding that after World War II, as they were losing, they tried to cleanse the record in order to hide what they had done. In this particular case, it's precisely the opposite. It's Hamas taking active video of themselves beheading people, murdering, mutilating, raping, and then posting those to social media in order to generate both terrorism and also apparently sympathy in certain sectors of the world community. I mean, there have been rallies, mass rallies in Sydney, in London, in New York, in favor of Hamas in the middle of all of this.
So, Ben, you say you have to watch these, but then there are the people who have seen these. This is from Forbes. Hamas threatens to execute Israeli civilian hostages for unprompted attacks on Gaza. The Washington Post. Hamas's coordinated attack caught Israel by surprise, but it comes after months of worsening tensions over violence at Al-Aqsa Mosque, a revered Muslim holy site. The one thing I said on the air yesterday, that you could excuse some of the Germans. I never would. But before Hitler came to power, he wrote about it clearly in his book. But it's such a horrific thing that a lot of people said, oh, well, he doesn't mean that. After your friends started disappearing, yeah, he did mean that. And but on this particular case, they're not writing about it. They're showing you what they will do. As you said, they tried to erase the records. These guys are showing you. How do people like these two headlines, Washington Post and Forbes, what do you say about those people?
They're so deeply convinced of their own pseudo-sophisticate view of the Middle East that they've decided that the truth doesn't matter. You can't let the facts get in the way of a good story. And that story is that these are people who think just like you and I think. These are people who have the same priorities. And really, this is just a territorial dispute, which means that if Israel would just make certain concessions to terrorist groups, then magically all of this would be solved. And you can see it implicit in that Washington Post description, even the absolutely bizarre lie that there's been years of worsening violence over the Temple Mount. I mean, I've been up to the Temple Mount multiple times, and the only people who have freedom of worship, true freedom of worship up there, are Muslims. It's run by the Islamic Waqf. If you're a Jew and you go up onto the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism, and you attempt to pray, they will remove you from the Temple Mount. But that's the sort of narrative that's been put out there. By the way, whenever I go up there and there's a picture of me, the Arab press will suggest that I'm storming the Temple Mount. That's literally the language they use, that it's storming. Yeah. I'm walking up there with a baby stroller and it's storming. Right. And the sort of propagandistic efforts to twist the conflict in particular ways results in death, because you're doing propaganda for evil people, and you're sucking people into a sense of complacency about what evil wants and what evil does. That ends with people falling asleep at the switch. When people fall asleep at the switch, people die, and more people are going to die because of this. I mean, the patent willingness of so many people, particularly on the political left, to put themselves to sleep to this. But there's some on the political right too, who just refuse to acknowledge the reality of what evil looks like. that costs lives, because evil knows that and they play on that. And you can see this in every tactic that Hamas uses. Hamas's tactic is, we will murder your babies and we will cut off their heads in their own beds, which is literally what they did in Kfar Aza. And then we'll go back to the Gaza Strip and we will hide behind babies. Their military headquarters was located for years beneath the Al-Shifa hospital, literally a hospital, because they understand that the West cares about killing civilians and they don't care whether civilians die. Right now, Israel is explicitly sending Arabic language media into the Gaza Strip, telling people not only where to leave, but where to go, like which pathways to take. And the Hamas terrorists are literally telling them to stay where they are so that they get killed by incoming Israeli ordnance. And then when people predictably die, then Hamas turns around understanding that we don't understand them and says, well, it must be that Israel is killing us, because we would never hide behind our own civilians. I mean, what do you think we are, animals? And the answer is, well, whether you're animals or animals wouldn't treat their own children like this. So no, I don't think you're animals. I think you're beneath animals. Animals would not treat their own offspring like this.
Let me show you the Palestinian supporters in Australia. There were these supporters, Australia, Netherlands, London, Spain, Turkey, Paris, New York. But this one in Australia in particular, they started chanting, "Gas the Jews, gas the Jews." I'm just having a hard time getting my arms around this, because for years the phrase, well, we didn't know for sure. We know. This is not about territory. This is about killing all of the Jews.
There's a reason why all of the synagogues where I live are on high alert. I mean, it's not about Israelis. And the mask is completely off here. I mean, they're shouting gas the Jews, not gas the Israelis or fight the settlements or whatever. It's not a political conflict. Obviously, as you suggest, it is a religious conflict when people are shouting gas the Jews in the streets. Also worthwhile noting that a random swastika in a dorm room somewhere in the United States will gain more headlines than that rally in Sydney will, where people are shouting en masse, gas the Jews. Trump supporters, in the eyes of the media in the United States, are often labeled Nazis, actual Nazis who are holding up actual swastikas while actually calling for the mass murder of Jews. Those are people who just have sophisticated complaints about territorial disputes in the Middle East.
I have about 90 seconds, and I had somebody in Washington, high-level official in Washington, tell me, I said, what should our nation be doing at this point? And he said, I think the only thing that I would suggest at this point is pray hard, pray for a miracle, because it's going to be it will take a miracle to keep us out of World War III. Are we headed there, Ben?
I don't think so, if America does the right things. And what that would amount to right now is providing Israel with the material that is necessary in order to win the war in Gaza, and also to intimidate Hezbollah off the button. So the real question right now in Israel, and I have, of course, family and friends who are in Israel right now, many of them American, and the real question there is whether Hezbollah gets in. Because if Hezbollah, which is located on the southern border of Lebanon, starts firing rockets into Israel, at that point, Israel's military is so stretched that they'll have no choice but to turn southern Lebanon into a parking lot. At that point, all bets are off the table. It's an existential threat. And if Hezbollah gets in, then Iran likely will attempt to get in. And then you are looking at not just a regional, but possibly a global conflict. This is why it's actually a very good move by the Biden administration to put an aircraft carrier off the coast of Lebanon and warn Hezbollah that they ought not get involved. That is really spending a penny to save a pound later. If this remains a regional conflict or a territorial conflict where Israel is able to secure its own future from the predations of Hamas, that's the best case outcome here. The worst case outcome here is escalation that could have been prevented by a little bit of preventative action.
Ben, our thoughts and prayers are with you, your family, and everybody in Israel. Thank you for being on with me today. God bless.
I appreciate it.
This is all caused by the unthinkable. And I am tired of every day coming out and saying, I can't believe this. This is the craziest thing ever. Everything we're going through right now, unthinkable. We all need to pray for the best. But if I may tell you about our sponsor, My Patriot Supply, let's prepare for the worst. That means teaching your kids what it means to be an American, showing and demonstrating courage, strength, but also preparedness, emergency food, may I suggest you stock up before the world goes even more insane. A 3-month emergency food kit from MyPatriotSupply.com. They're the nation's leader in self-reliance. If you order yours today, you can do it by MyPatriotSupply.com. You're going to have overnight delivery. If you do it by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's same-day shipping. MyPatriotSupply.com. 2,000 calories a day, really good. Keeps your strength up for when you need it. MyPatriotSupply.com. Dave Rubin is a dear friend of mine. He's also Jewish. And I remember sitting on this set with him maybe 3 or 4 years ago and saying to him, at what point do we say this anti-Semitism thing, they are coming, they're coming. And nobody would pay attention to it, just like they didn't in Germany. I can't believe how open these people are. Unlike at the beginning of Germany, no one really took them seriously. Now there's no doubt that their goal is to kill every Jew on the planet. Dave, welcome.
Glenn, it's good to see you, my friend. I wish it was under better circumstances. It's interesting. We didn't do any prep, the two of us, before this, but I was actually going to start by saying that about 3 years ago, we did my show together. I didn't realize you were going to be in that studio today. And you brought out a copy of Mein Kampf that was almost untouched. It's a lambskin cover. It's when you touch it, it almost feels like human skin. I mean, yeah. It's chilling, actually. It was a gift. It's an original copy of Mein Kampf from, I think his name was Klaus Schenk, if I'm not mistaken.
No. It was from the guy that Tom Cruise played in Valkyrie. I can't remember his name now, but the hero that tried to kill Hitler.
He tried to kill Hitler, and I apologize for getting the name wrong.
All right.
We're all on kind of overload at the moment. But what you just said there is true. This has nothing to do with occupation. There is no occupation, by the way. There never was a Palestinian state. There was a British mandate of Palestine during the British Empire, and Jews and Arabs and Christians lived there. Before that, there was the Ottoman Empire. I see an awful lot of people calling for 75 years of occupation must end. It's odd. I'm not sure the British want to reconquer the Middle East. The Jews have been there for a long time. The story of Hanukkah takes place in what we now, unfortunately, I don't use this term anymore, and I hope you won't either, we call the West Bank. It's just the West Bank of the Jordan River. For all history, Judea. It was known as Judea and Samaria. Yes. You're not going to believe, Glenn, who lived in Judea. That's the hills, the Judean hills, that the story of Hanukkah is told about, where the Jews defended their land from the Greek invaders. As you know, I was just in Israel about 6 months ago, and everywhere you go there, and you've been there, Glenn, and you out of anyone that does what we do for a living, you are the greatest student of history, and I think have done more to reclaim not only American tradition, but Western tradition, and do that with the artifacts that you buy and the way you tell your stories on your show. But you go to Jerusalem, and you literally go to these excavations where you can see generations and time go by the rock and the stone, and they uncover ancient Hebrew from thousands of years ago, the Western Wall of the temple, of the great Jewish temple from thousands of years ago. It's a retaining wall that they built a mosque on top of. Which do you think came first? We could do the history all day long, and I actually think it's important to do, because part of what got us here is that no one understands the history. The idea that Jews are foreign invaders to Israel. Which religion came first, before Christianity and before Islam? Where was Jesus of Nazareth from? And Jesus was a Jew. All of that stuff, it's important, but I know we can get lost in all of that. But to directly address the way you started this program, this is what is the attempted second Holocaust, period. What side would Hitler be on right now? What side would the Nazis be on right now? What would Nazis be doing if they had the choice, if they had the ability to do it? How about raping women next to their dead husbands? How about stealing girls and bringing them back to Glenn, I have seen things. I have a friend in Israel who has sent me things that have not made it to social media yet. I've seen things that leave me, there aren't words. You say there aren't words. There are not words for this. And this is medieval barbarity. And we can either decide as a Western world that we will stand up against it or not. Because for anyone, and by the way, Glenn, you and I are both very libertarian in a lot of ways. And that means that we do care about America's borders first, and we care about America first, and we want a budget that makes sense and a foreign policy that makes sense. But if you think for 1 second that if they take out the 8 million pesky Jews who live in the state that's the size of New Jersey, if they kill all of them, and Hitler, right, there's not one Jew living in Gaza, by the way. They don't want anything to do with Gaza. They disengaged from Gaza in 2005. There's a Gazan border with Egypt. Egypt is blowing apart the border because they don't want their Palestinian quote unquote brothers. All of this being said, if you think that if they wipe out all the Jews, that somehow this will end the problem, then you just have to look what's going on in Dearborn, Michigan. You just have to look at the rallies that are happening in Dublin, Ireland, and New York City and everywhere else. And do you think they're going to go, okay, we got rid of the Jews, let's pack it up? No, game on.
Dave, I tell you, there's supposed to be another intifada on Friday in Jerusalem. But, we have caught, what is it, 150 of those on the terrorist watch list coming across our border. Those are the ones we caught. There are sleeper cells here in America. We are going to pay a very high price just for those who came across the border with God knows what, but also the people in this country who are cheering on the killing and beheading of babies. There is no way to put these two civilizations together. There's no way.
Glenn, we truly are at civilizational crossroads right now. We have to decide, and when I say we, I mean America, but I mean France, I mean Britain, I mean all Western nations have to decide, what do you want to do? We saw how multiculturalism absolutely failed Western Europe, right? They let in all of these people in the last decade. It crushed their social systems. They do virtually no integration. These people that you're showing videos of, do you think they care about the Constitution? Do you think they care about free speech? Do you think they believe that the founding of America was just? They don't believe that the Jews have anything to do with Israel. Wait till they figure out what the American connection with this land is, right? By the way, I'm not making that argument. America has every right and duty to be here. We're the freest nation in the history of the world that has provided more freedom to anyone, unimaginable freedom. But this is a civilizational battle. And on a personal note, Glenn, as somebody that's been ahead of most of these things, and you have for a long, long time, you've been ahead of these things where people that would say Glenn Beck's crazy 10 years ago, you predicted virtually all of this. This is where we're at, and it's, I don't know, it's a pleasure it's just an honor to always work with you and try to work through this stuff, because it's here. It's here. It is here. It is the time we're choosing. And Dave, I am with you, and I am with Israel. And it's an honor to work with you, my friend. Tomorrow, we hopefully will be able to turn a page on a new chapter of Standing. From Dallas, good night.